Good morning. My name is John Barcello, Deputy Director of the Arizona Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation, and Reentry. I'll be speaking on behalf of the department. However, I will not be answering any questions today. Victim representatives did not attend today's execution and will not be present for this briefing. I kindly ask that you respect their privacy. After my remarks, you'll hear from Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays. She will not be taking questions in this room. However, you may reach out to her media team with any follow-up questions. Following Attorney General Mays, you'll hear from the media witnesses who will share their observations and answer any questions that you may have. I will now provide remarks on behalf of ADCRR. Today, by order of the Arizona Supreme Court, the state of Arizona carried out the death sentence of Richard Djerf by means of lethal injection at the Arizona State Prison Complex here in Florence. Mr. Djerf's last meal included a double cheeseburger with lettuce and tomato, onion rings with ketchup, a slice of cherry pie and whipped cream, and a 20-ounce Pepsi with ice. Mr. Djerf did not elect to have any spiritual advisor present with him during the process. Mr. Djerf was brought into the execution chamber at 10:01 a.m., and ADCRR staff read the warrant of execution at 10:23 a.m. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Djerf gave his last statement, which I'll read momentarily. The IV procedure began at 10:05 a.m. and was complete at 10:21 a.m. Mr. Djerf's veins were not optimal, which was expected, resulting in a few attempts prior to a successful IV placement. The drug protocol began at 10:24 a.m. and was completed at 10:28 a.m. Mr. Djerf was pronounced dead at 10:40 a.m. ADCRR Director Ryan Thornell has notified the Governor's office that the sentence has been carried out and provided them with a time of death. In coordination with the Office of Inspector General and the medical examiner, has taken custody of the body and will be issuing a certificate of death. I personally observed the process of the events today, including the execution. I can say the process went according to ADCRR policy and procedure. As you will hear from witnesses today, Mr. Djerf did not put up any resistance during the process. The medical team went about their work according to procedure. During the administration of the drug protocol, Mr. Djerf took a few heavy breaths with a brief snoring sound. By all accounts, the process went according to plan without any incident. When asked if he would like to provide any last words, Mr. Djerf said, and I quote, "I do not." We will now hear from Arizona Attorney General Mays. As a reminder, she will not be taking any questions today. AG Mays.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge first the investigators, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, and court staff who continue to work tirelessly on behalf of the citizens of Arizona to bring about truth and justice, in this case and many others ongoing in our criminal justice system. The death penalty is the law of Arizona. And yet, each time the state asserts this ultimate measure of justice, we must recognize the seriousness and the solemnness of taking a life. Today should be about the members of the Luna family, who Richard Djerf brutally murdered that September day in 1993. Those 4 innocent victims deserve justice, and their loved ones deserve closure. To the Luna family and other crime victims like them, know that the Arizona Attorney General's office will fight for the justice that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. I will now turn it over to the media witnesses who will come up, starting with Mr. Hook and follow with those seated to his left. The They will introduce themselves and their media affiliation and take questions from the podium. Mr. Hook.
Thank you, everyone. My name is John Hook, Fox 10 News in Phoenix. This is my second execution I've witnessed. I covered the execution and witnessed the execution of James Dean Clark in 1993. He, too, killed 4 people in Elfrida. This was a far more clinical situation than that. That was also lethal injection. This was, I would say, cleaner, with the exception of the IV insertion. You got the tick-tock of how this all happened. As we entered the room, this is about 10:01. We get in a little before that. Mr. Djerf comes in at 10:01. He's in all white flip-flops, black flip-flops. There are monitors that we're watching that have the plungers for the insertion of the drug, and 2 aerial pictures of him on the table in a position like that. Curtain open at 10:07. There's a team there, a restraint team, that puts him on the table. That's a team of 5 that brought him in. He was completely compliant, laid down on the table. They put him in restraints across his chest, his legs, his arms. He was very compliant. There was one mention, somebody just checked on him, said, "Are you okay?" And he nodded and said yes. The insertion of the IV, the medical team comes in, 4 members. The insertion of the IV in the left arm I had at 10:12, in the right arm at 10:13. These IVs were put in and removed several times. I counted 4. They were having a really difficult time finding a suitable vein to administer the needle. That was clear. The right arm was finally inserted, I had at 10:18. So that would be 5 minutes of trying to get this right. And they did. This is not easy stuff, especially with a very heavy-set man. The left arm, again, which was inserted at 10:12, finally got inserted at 10:21. So that would be 9 minutes from start to finish of trying to find a suitable vein. That was the only speed bump in carrying out this, and this is not unusual in the medical world with a heavy set guy. The first black plunger that we're watching on the monitor goes down at 10:24. There are 2 green, 2 black syringes loaded with pentobarbital, and I assume saline. The black plunger goes down at 10:24. To be honest with you, this was very quick. I detected heavy breathing and grunts about 2 minutes later. He looked sedated, his mouth slightly agape. And by 10:30, his breathing was depressed, shallow, and by 10:30, 10:31, we're talking now 6 minutes, I detected no breathing, no movement, no reaction at all. 10:32, a technician came in to check him, I think feeling for a pulse in the artery here. His eyes were closed, no movement, no breathing, motionless by 10:32. I would say Mr. Djerf was gone, but I'm not a clinician. Time of death officially 10:40, as you heard. So I have onset of death from start to finish, 6 minutes. I think it has to be said, there's always concern and worry about the condemned and whether they go through pain, suffering, discomfort. But I'd really urge people to think about the Luna family. They endured 7 hours of torture in that house 32 years ago. It was a heinous crime, and we have to think about the Lunas during this. As the Attorney General said, they deserved justice as well. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Brianna Whitney. I'm the true crime correspondent at Arizona's Family, Channel 3, and CBS 5. Much of what I saw echoes what John also mentioned, so I'm just going to go kind of quickly through the time frames that I had and then talk a little bit about my last conversations with Richard Djerf as recently as yesterday up into his execution today. So I also had, at about 10:02, Djerf entered the room. 4 technicians came in with him to perform this. And at 10:05, where we were sitting in kind of like a pews type stands area, the curtains opened and we could see him there on the gurney. He looked very calm from the onset. He did not restrain. He did not fight back. He did not say anything. I also noted he did not look at us, and something that he told me in messages before his execution was that he had a lot of anxiety that people were going to actually watch him die. He was restrained, and that's when they started looking for the vein with this fairly lengthy IV process. At about 10:12 and 10:13 is when they started to try to get the IV in, and multiple times they took the needle out and then re-put it back in. One of the techs actually went to the other side after they got one arm in to help the other ones. But during that whole time, Richard Djerf didn't really move or show any sort of signs of any struggle. He kept his eyes shut. The only thing I saw was his head shake just a tad with a little bit of a twitch in his shoulder, and that was it. At 10:23, the death warrant was read, and that's when he was asked if he had any last words. He said, "I do not." That was somewhat surprising because he has been very remorseful in the past couple weeks, but he had said something to me a couple days ago that he felt like he got everything off his chest with a statement to the media kind of explaining the immense amount of remorse he's had for the crimes that he committed. At 10:24, I had the first syringe going in, followed very quickly by the others. On our monitors, we could see 8 syringes, but they only used 4 during this process. At about 10:25, that's when I also saw him take what I would describe as a few puffs of air, basically a small snore, and then it appeared he went to sleep. And that was the last movement that I ever saw from Richard Djerf. At 10:30 is when he appeared to really lose color, and during this time frame, he really went from having that full color in his face to looking almost a bluish gray by the end of this process. At 10:32, a technician came in and checked on him, like John said. It looked like he or she was checking the chest and neck area, likely for a pulse. We didn't see any movement. By then, it appeared that he was pretty lifeless. And I wrote at 10:34, it seemed like he was dead, but the official time of death was at 10:40. This all seemed to go very routine. It felt very peaceful. It felt very clinical. There seemed to be no signs of struggle or pain from Richard Djerf during this time frame. And the last message that he sent me yesterday, he said he got everything off his chest. He wrote out the names of the Luna family and said their names should be remembered, not mine. Does anybody have any questions about the process or anything that we saw? Good. Thanks.
Sejal Govindara, I'm with the Associated Press. So at 10:02, we saw Djerf enter the room and lie on the table. He was wearing a white short-sleeved jumpsuit and flip-flops, and around that time, restraints were secured. He was covered with a white sheet up until about his chest area, and at 10:05, we saw the curtains open. Around 10:12 was when the IV process appeared to begin. It took about 9 minutes for both arms, IV lines, to be taped down. At 10:18, the right IV was inserted and taped down, and at 10:21, the left arm was inserted and taped down. When asked if he had last words, Djerf said, "I do not." At about 10:25, I saw the black syringe pressed. At 10:25, about within the same minute, I saw the green syringe being pressed. And at that point, I noticed several noises from Djerf, including sort of a grunting sound, and a puffing breath. At 10:27, the second green syringe was pressed. And at 10:28, the second black syringe was pressed. Djerf was still largely between 10:28 and 10:40, and his time of death was 10:40, is what it was called. I didn't notice or hear noises after the second green syringe was pushed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hector Lagunas, news reporter with Univision. I'll go ahead and mention something briefly in English, and then I'll go ahead and just translate to Spanish. But I can agree with most of us. I think we can also agree that most of us were nervous. I was, for the most part, anxious. I felt anxiety. So did my colleague as well. I feel like when everything was done with, that feeling was gone, right? But like you guys said, he was cooperating with everyone. We did see 4 technicians, 4 doctors, so to say. He was tied up from his arms, chest, knees, legs, so to say, but he also had a white sheet covered up to his chest. At 10:16, something that we briefly talked about, I did notice that he moved his left leg. That was before they actually applied the IV. Like they said, they were struggling to put the IV into his arms. They kept poking him. I did see blood in his arms as they were trying to poke him. They were at the same time cleaning the blood from his arms. Something else that caught my attention, he walked in, I felt a little stiff, nervous. He was holding his chin up. And as he was laying down, he kept his chin and mouth up. When he passed, he had his mouth semi-opened with his teeth showing. That's when I noticed that he possibly had passed away. And that's pretty much what I have. Something else, I mean, his skin color, he's reddish. He walked in, obviously he's a white male. And when they applied the injections, it went quickly from reddish color to a very pale and gray color in a matter of 1 minute, I would say. Ahora voy a cambiar en español. Él entró de blanco, cooperando con los 4 técnicos o doctores, por así decirlo. Lo ataron de los brazos, pecho, pierna y pies. En ningún momento abrió los ojos. He never opened his eyes from start toward the end. Siempre mantuvo los ojos cerrados. Lo mencionaba, también lo taparon con una sábana blanca hasta el pecho después de haberlo amarrado o atado. A las 10:16 lo observé mover su pie izquierdo. A las 10:27, ya lo comentaban mis colegas, fue cuando comenzó a roncar un tanto fuerte. Yo conté estos ronquidos, fueron 4 aproximadamente en 4 diferentes ocasiones, hasta que finalmente se le observó tratando de obtener su respiración. Alzó un poco el pecho, cae para atrás y fue cuando aparentemente pues él fallece. A las 10:30, ya lo mencionaba, también cambia su color de piel. Él es un hombre blanco, de origen anglosajón. Cuando le aplican estas inyecciones, cuando se las administran, su color de piel cambió en cuestión de 1 minuto, de un color rojiza, piel rojiza, a un color muy pálido, muy gris, muy gris. Y me gustaría reiterar en cuanto a ese detalle. A las 10:33 le revisaron el pulso y a las 10:40 fue cuando pues anunciaron su muerte. Do you guys have any questions?
You mentioned that his eyes were never open. When he walked in, were his eyes open, and if not, what when he closed his eyes?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Yeah. When he walked into the room, were his eyes open? And then, since they were, at what point did he close his eyes?
Good question, because when he walked into the room, the curtains were still closed. So we weren't able to see, obviously, I mean, he would have to see where he's heading to, right? But we could only see their feet. It was men dressed up in black. They were not the technicians or the medics that, administered the injections, but as soon as they opened the curtains, he kept his eyes closed from start to finish. I never saw him open his eyes. Again, I felt like he was always very stiff, holding his chin up, very nervous in a way. And towards the end, like I said, I did see that his mouth opened, and then before they closed the curtains, I was able to see that we could see his teeth, meaning his mouth was, again, opened.
So by the time that the curtains opened, he was already down.
By the time the curtains were open, he was almost on top of the bed, if not on top already. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hector, just if you can go over in Spanish a little bit of your feelings covering this and seeing this kind of procedure for our Hispanic community.
Es la primera ejecución que logramos presenciar y creo que es increíble ver a un hombre morir de tal manera, porque mucho hemos cubierto las escenas de crímenes. Tú, José Ángel, has estado ahí con nosotros y estamos acostumbrados a llegar y ver un cuerpo sin vida, mas sin embargo no logramos divisar la manera en que matan a estas personas. Entonces, el tratar de asimilar de que este hombre entra completamente saludable y de un momento a otro ya están sin vida, es difícil de procesar. Creo que de ahí viene la ansiedad, el nerviosismo, y aquí estamos para contarlo.
Good morning. Matthew Casey, KJZZ 91.5, Public Radio. I agree with pretty much everything that my fellow witnesses have said. One thing I would notice is that it was standing room only in the death room, and up on the ledge there was a box of tissues and a stack of brown paper bags, sort of like vomit bags in an airplane. It seemed of the four techs, one of them was in charge and probably the most trained. They put the right arm in first, and then they went over and helped put in the left arm. It was a very short, brief period of time between when they said, the execution is now commencing, and when his breathing appeared to stop. Like, he kind of his stomach kind of rose a few times, and then it was pretty quick. And he seemed to have stopped breathing before the final syringe was put in. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
For that period when they were trying to get the IV in, was there any conversation, any looks, anything from the technicians there that stuck out to you?
I didn't hear them speaking. They had a device that appeared to be like helping them search for a vein. So there were multiple people on the left side. The right guy got his one done, and then they seemed to move, and the right guy went over and did the left side
He
too.
was very compliant during that. It was remarkable because, they had to stick him several times. So, and take out, reinsert, try to find another suitable vein. And it was remarkable how composed he was during that. He did not wince, he just sat there, he was laying there with his eyes closed, and he was...
Yeah, I never saw him open his eyes. I didn't really see him make any sort of... The only thing that was the most that we heard from him. And yes, I agree that I didn't see him open his eyes. His mouth was closed the entire time. He was laying on the gurney with his forearms up, and heavy-set dude, so it was probably hard for them to search for a pulse when they did. But they did that about 10 minutes before they declared him dead.
Was our Attorney General seated in the same area that you guys were in?
She was sitting behind us, next to County Attorney Rachel Mitchell.
Did she react in any way?
I was watching the execution, not her.
Did you recognize anyone else who was there to witness?
Did we?
I did not.
I believe the prosecutor from the original for the case was there next to Rachel Mitchell. You can double confirm that, but I believe that was him.
No, sir. I believe the Department of Corrections said, or maybe it was the AG that said that no members of the family were going to be there.
You mentioned the room had standing room only. Can you just clarify what that means?
There wasn't enough room for the guards to sit down, right? Like, we had a bunch of guards with us, keep us in line, and they had to stand on either side of the room. And it's like they're like luxury bleachers, right? Padded bleachers that you sit on, and they were all full.
I counted 18 in that room. It's probably 15 by 20-foot room.
I have a question. Knowing the crimes that Djerf was convicted of and the horrible things he did to the Luna family, can you kind of describe what it was like to know what he's accused of and has said he's done, to kind of see his demeanor today and how that is perhaps different to the day that he committed that crime? Can you come to the mic? I'll take it.
Yeah, so our station's in a little bit of a unique situation with this because Djerf gave one of our anchors a jailhouse interview in 1995. That jailhouse interview happened between his conviction and when he was sentenced to death. During that interview, he was exceptionally nonchalant about the crimes. He said he did it off the bat. He basically described it as watching himself in a movie. We know back in the day he was very into horror movies, violent crime type movies. And so he kind of described himself in this cinematic fashion of how he carried out these crimes. He was pretty no bones about it, about taking the life of the 5-year-old boy. He raped the teenage girl. And he actually asked the mom, would you like to watch your child die, or would you like your child to watch you die? And I think those kind of thoughts, knowing that that's what happened in 1993, was at least what was running through my mind when we went in there. It can feel a bit archaic in the way that you are all being put into these stands to watch somebody's life end with the curtains opening like it's a show. But I think when you kind of break it down to what actually happened and that he talked about it like that back in the day, it does kind of separate the person he is now, where he felt remorseful, wants the victims to be remembered. That seemed to be a different person than he was 30 plus years ago when he carried out these crimes. This was my first execution witnessing it. I had covered several executions here. I think the most anxiety-provoking moment was walking in there, the curtains opening, but I at least kept reminding myself of the horrific nature of the crimes and how his demeanor was at the time, and that's what he was being put to death for, if that answers the question. Anybody else?
There are people that have been critical of this process and in the past expressed concerns over things like heavy breathing.
Yeah.
You described this as peaceful, I think is the word you used.
Completely. I actually think it felt more nerve-wracking walking in, seeing him get the restraints on and the IV going in. By the time the process actually started, it felt very peaceful. I kept describing it as clinical because that's how it felt. It didn't seem like he suffered at all, and people are very critical of this. And I've also had a lot of people ask me, what if this happens to somebody who's not guilty? Djerf admitted to these crimes from day one, and he himself told me he believed he also should be put to death. So if that's any sort of reassurance to people who believe that maybe this should not be his fate, Djerf himself believed he deserved to die because of what he did.
In your conversations with Djerf, do you know if he invited any witnesses to attend today, or did you see anyone who had been one of his invited witnesses?
I did not, but you had talked to...
There was the last person that left before us. He may have been there on his behalf. He was a gentleman, elderly, by himself.
But it did not appear that anybody was there on behalf of Djerf besides possibly attorneys, and then no victim family. And I should note, too, yes, I have had conversations with Djerf ahead of time, but I did reach out to the surviving member of the Luna family asking if he would like to share his story and if he was going to be at the execution. I did not hear back.
John, would you mind putting to the mic and just kind of describing the emotion in that room? You guys say the standing room only, there's a large amount of people in there watching this execution. You've seen an execution before, some people their first time, but either way, it's still a very
Yeah.
weighing that with what you did?
It's anxiety producing, walking in there and even thinking about it leading up to the event, because no one generally knows when their life is going to end. And for Richard Djerf, it's date certain. He knows exactly when he's going to die. So throughout the week, I'm thinking, this is Richard Djerf's last Monday. This is his last Tuesday. So it's odd in that way. I think going through the crime in detail, which I did, and I did this with James Dean Clark, who murdered 4 people on a dude ranch in Elfrida in the 70s. To go back through the crime, if you ever are in this situation, it helps you kind of center yourself on why you're there and why this is happening. That's critical, because without that background, to just walk in and watch somebody's life ended is pretty daunting. Even somebody like Richard Djerf. So yeah, it's anxiety producing, but I have to say again, you know, this crime, and the reason I'm here today is because it happened 2 weeks after I arrived at Channel 10. So this has been with me a long time, and I felt like I had to see it through completion. Otherwise, I would not have. Not that it's terribly upsetting, but it's just not something I need to see over and over. Twice is enough.
I know when I was media witness, they asked us if Director Cornell was there. Did you see him?
No, I did not. Director was not there to my knowledge.
I didn't see him either.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. As our media briefing comes to an end, please remember the following. First, there will be no media interviews in here on the property. You are, however, welcome to film stand-ups at the staging area off of 79 and Butte Avenue. The staging area will close in about 2 hours. If you have any questions for ADCRR, please reach out to our media team at media@azadc.gov. Lastly, we'll keep this room open for about 30 minutes to allow for some wrap-up. And this concludes our media briefing for today, and thank you for attending.